Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for part two in our series on connection design for Tekla structures using the Giza software. My name is Jim Moody. I'm the Director of Business Development, and joining me today will be Ben Bossmeyer, our software specialist. So, just a brief agenda on our plans for today. We will do a brief webinar overview just to go over the content of our session today. Ben will then walk us through a Giza demonstration on that content, and then we'll close out with some final comments and open the floor up for questions. So, overview of today's session. Of course, we're going to talk about the Tekla integration, and we're definitely going to be showing in depth the bidirectional exchange of connections between Giza and Tekla. And of course, a lot of this is based on information from the calculated loads that we highlighted in our part one webinar, which if that is something you wish to brush up on, you can find on our website. And an example process flow on how this integration works is shown here. And it basically works in a clockwork format with the exporting of the connection from Tekla at the top, and we export the details directly into the Giza system. And then we go through a verify and design process. And we'll be spending a lot of time in this area going over the forms within Giza, how to work the Giza system, and how easy it is to do the verification and design of connections. And then once that is complete, we can import back into Tekla the updated designed connection, as well as any additional details that may be pertinent to the connection or something we may want to put on drawings. So real briefly, that's the overview on what we're going to cover today. And at this point, I would like to hand it over to Ben to start the demonstration process.
Thanks, Jim. So yeah, I'm here to show you guys how exactly you can get your connections from Tekla structures into Giza, design them, and then put them back into Tekla structures. Last time we went over how to set up your Tekla model to be used in Giza, and this time we're actually going to grab those connections and do some designing. So let's get started. The first thing you need to do to get your connections into Giza is to highlight your connections. So as long as all of the components are highlighted in your connection, you can hit this Get button here. Giza will recognize that they are connections and will put them into this big list over here. Once you've got this list over here, it may be a little confusing to see what exactly you're looking at for each item on the list. But if you click this green button down here when you've got one highlighted, it will show up down here, so we can see exactly what we're looking at. As well as this little button, this red circle here. This will show us all of the connections that didn't quite make it into Giza, whether that being it's unsupported, we don't yet support it, or it's unsuccessful. It could be an error, or the connection could be set up incorrectly in Tekla. But we want these 6 connections here. These would be the 6 connections, these 6-year connections. And we're going to hit the process button. And what this does is it fully puts these into Giza, runs all of the initial calculations so that we can design them. And the more connections that you highlight and the more connections that you process into Giza, obviously the longer that this process will take. And you can see we've got one line item here on this list now. And it shows up as one line item because we do have 6 connections that are identical. So Giza recognizes that they are the same connection, and that allows us to design them all at the same time. Before we get into the actual designing bit, I want to go over a little bit of how to use Giza's UI and show you how everything works. So this list will keep growing as you add connections, and it may be hard to figure out where connections are or which connections you're looking at. So you can actually sort this list. You can sort it by phase, or you can sort it by status, or you can just type in a little keyword here, any of these items, and it will sort by that as well. And you can see that you know, the primary and secondary members, the loads, and the UCV and the governing check for these connections, as well as the status. This one would be failed. And just so you exactly know what you're looking at, you can highlight individual connections or members that are connecting. And if we click this button here, this will take us into single view. So if we only wanted to design one of these connections, or if we wanted to see specifically all of the nitty-gritty stuff about a single connection, this will bring us into single view. So you can see a basic sketch of the connection, as well as all of the info that you'll ever want to know about your connections. So if we go to loads here, you can see that there's 50 kips on this connection, and it'll show the job information that we set up last time in Tekla structures. And to get back to our multiple list view, all we have to do is click this button up here, and it will take us back to our list. So now that I've shown you all of this user interface stuff, we can get into actually designing the connection. So to design all 6 of these at the same time, all we have to do is click the failed status here, and this will bring up what we call the every single limit state that that Giza is calculating for this connection. And only one of them is failing, and that would be in the red. This would be the shear capacity of the reduced section, and we can see that that is the governing check. The governing check being the limit state that is failing the most, and it has a UCV of above 1, which means it's failing. UCV is sort of the numerical value for the status of the connection, so anything above 1 will be failing, and anything below 1 would be passing. And to start designing this connection, all we have to do is hit the design button. And this will bring up the recommended list of design changes that Giza is giving us. So Giza recommends to add a doubler plate. But let's say you needed to change something that wasn't on the recommended list. You can click the All Options button and change whatever value you need to. But I think the doubler plate is a good idea, so we're going to click that, and then calculate. And when you hit calculate, Giza will recheck all of these limit states and update them based on the design values that you changed. And we can see now that our connection is passing. So now that we've got a fully passed connection, we can then add it back to our Tekla model. All we have to do is hit the Apply Design button, and Giza will start adding these design changes back into the Tekla model. So if we look here, we can see that Giza is adding these doubler plates that we added. It's going one by one, and since we're designing 6 at one time, it's going to take a little bit longer, and you can see that it's scooted down the angle so that it could fit in this doubler plate here. And our design was successfully applied. So you can see there's 6 doubler plates on here, and it's added them to the other side as well. And now Giza will recalculate the connection just to make sure no Tekla dependencies have changed, which it looks like they haven't because it's still passing. And now we can apply the capacity. So the applying design, that's just the physical. It's changing the design of the connection. Applying the capacity will input the capacity of the connection, put all those numbers in the back end, as well as it will change each of these to a nice, pretty green color to show that the connection has passed. We'll go over how to set up this color coding in a different webinar, but for now, it's a nice little green. So our connection capacity was successfully applied, and we're done with these 6 connections. And we can go over here and we can see that these connections have passed, and all 6 of these are green. So now I've shown you a simple shear connection. I want to go over to a moment connection now to design, and we're going to go to the one right here. It's a 2-way welded moment connection. So to grab this, all we need to do is highlight both of these cones and hit the Get button. And Giza will recognize that these 2 moment connections need to be viewed as one connection when calculating all of its limit states. And if we go over and hover over this, we can see that it is getting both of those components. And if we hit process, we can start to design our connection. And something new has been added to our list, which is the connection we want. So here we've got two line items because there are two beams in this connection. We've got the one primary column and the two secondary beams. And it'll show the loads for both beams, as well as the governing check and UCV for both beams. And it, count here is 1 because we've only got one connection. And it looks like they're both failing. So if we click either of these failed icons, we can design this connection. And the same check window pops up, but now you can see we've got two tabs here up at the top. We can see beam 1 and beam 2, because each of these beams need their own limit states to be calculated. It looks like we've got a lot more limit states that are failing this time. We've got some bolts that are failing, and some of the shear plate, and the welds. It looks like it's probably going to be the same on both sides of the connection. So to design this, it's the same as before. We just hit the design button. And Giza is recommending a lot more options. And you can see there's two tabs here as well to design either beam. So we'll start with the first beam. I already know what to put in here. So bear with me as I enter in these values. And now that that's done, we can hit the calculate button. Giza will recalculate all of these limit states based on the changes that I just made. If we go to beam 1, it looks like everything's passing. Nice green OKs there. Beam 2 is still failing, so we can design again. And you can design as many times as you need to and calculate as many times as you need to get all the changes that you need to make. So I'll just change all these values here again. It's going to be identical to the first one, and then calculate again. And now it looks like both of our beams are passing, which means we can then apply our design back into the Tekla model. Giza will start adding these bolts in, adding the welds, and if we go around to the other side, Peter's chugging a little bit. We can see that the bolt rows have been added. And all of the changes were successfully applied. Once again, it'll recheck just to make sure that nothing has changed in Tekla. Didn't pull any tricks on us. And it looks like everything is still passing. So with that, we can apply our capacity. Capacity is successfully applied. It doesn't look green on that side, but the plate is green on this side. So we can close that. We can see our remote connection on our list now is passing. And it does say applied. Whenever you apply your connection capacity, this applied will show up. And now there's one more connection that I want to show you guys. This one would be a vertical brace connection. It's this one right here. We've got a K brace with HSS braces. And to grab this, we have to grab all of the components within this connection. So 1, 2, 3, and hit our get button. And you can see it has 3 components in this one here, and we'll hit process. And we can see another item has been added onto our list, but this time it's got 3 rows on it. This is because we've got 1 row for the beam and then 1 row for each of the braces. And we can see here, and we can see all the loads attached to that as well. And it looks like everything's failing. So let's go ahead and fix that. If we click any one of these, our check window will once again pop up and show us what we need to change. Looks like we've got a bunch of not okays. We can expand these lists and see exactly what's wrong here. And once again, we do have 3 tabs up at the top because each brace and the beam needs their own limit states. So why don't we go ahead and start designing? For this webinar, I do have all of these values written down so that I can quickly design each of these connections. And this one in particular does have a lot of values to update, so just bear with me as I go through and enter in all of these values. And to make this connection pass, we're going to need to change quite a bit. And as I'm going through this, you can see that I'm changing the angle sizes, I'm changing the bolt types, the weld lengths, the gusset plate thickness, adding cover plates, and even applying transfer force. Giza really does give you all the tools you need to design your connections. If we hit the calculate button here, we can see if all those different changes that I made make our connection pass. Looks like we've got a big green pass down here, so it looks like everything worked. So now we can apply the design. And our design values were successfully applied. So we can recalculate all of these checks, making sure once again that nothing has changed. And it looks like nothing has. So we can apply the capacity, put all those numbers in there, and the connection capacity is successfully applied. Nice and green. And yeah, that about does it for the demo portion of the webinar. So now I'll hand it back over to Jim to continue.
Great. Thanks for that in-depth demo, Ben. Really appreciate it. So just to recap our session today, we have our closing comments and some closing thoughts here that we can go through based on what we saw today. So we're really focusing on streamlining the process for your connection design. We do have case studies that have revealed up to an 80% reduction in time spent on the connection design process. We offer the ability to collaborate directly with other project stakeholders by sharing Giza files with other Giza users. So an example would be for you to share the design of your connections with a connection designer that is responsible for the stamping, sealing, and approval process. And they could just simply electronically go through that process instead of shuffling paper back and forth. And we briefly went over some of the connections today in the demo, but just as a recap, our system supports 129 different connection configurations within the Tekla system. We also support the AISC 13th and 14th editions, both ASD and LRFD. And we also support the New York City building code checks. There are a few additional checks that the New York City building code requires, and we cover those as well. We work with combined load conditions, just as a reminder, as you have maybe a brace and a lateral member, we can look at those combined forces and apply those into the connection design process automatically. Our system is consistently rated as very easy to use, both by our customers and those that choose a 15-day trial. They just want to see how easy it is. And we've had some customers that have made the statement that they didn't lose any time on the project or their daily activities while they were learning the Giza system. So we're very proud of being a very easy to use system. And it's a proven product built from a proven
Nothing comes to
process.
mind. I think you
Internally, we
covered everything.
have resources that do connection design, and they use this software on a daily basis to provide that service to the fabrication market. So what are the next steps in this process for today's session at least? We'll open up the floor for any questions at this point, and there's a chat box. I'm going to ask that you type in your question in the chat box. We will stay around here for a few minutes and handle any of those questions that come in. If we don't handle your particular question, please enter one anyway, and we will get that logged into the system, and then we will reply back to the entire audience with the question and the answer. So any questions coming in? There's some being typed now. So the first question, what versions of Tekla? So it's Tekla Structures 18 up through 2017i. Those are the Tekla structure versions that we support. Any other questions? The makeup of the 129. So, okay, Ben obviously showed a few in the session, but just as a broad stroke here, we do cover shear, moment, vertical brace. The shear components, you can add an axial force into the connection design process, and the variations that we have: wide flange bracing, tube steel bracing, single angle, double angle bracing, and so forth. So the 129 is a combination of all of those variables. Any other questions? We're going to wrap it up here shortly, but please continue to enter in your questions, and we will definitely follow up with any of those that we do not catch here during the session. And we'll do this one last question that's coming in and is fixing a typo. Sure. So the question is, how do we license the system? System is licensed by a standalone version dedicated to an individual computer, and also a network system, so based on concurrent users. So you can share that amongst many users, just first come, first serve, log in, log out type of scenario. So Ben, were there any other things that you wish to add?
Nothing comes to mind. I think you covered everything.
Okay, so that wraps up our questions. Just a couple things here is our website is listed on the screen, gizasteel.com. I invite everyone to go visit, poke around the system, poke around the site, and definitely if it's of interest, we have a 15-day free trial. It's a full version. There's no restrictions on it. And of course, we'll provide the necessary training and support to help you through that 15-day trial period. There's some contact information for myself and the general phone number for either myself or Ben, so please feel free to reach out to us beyond this session if you have any questions and anything else you'd like to learn. So I thank you very much for your time. A little note there on the bottom, our next webinar will be part 3 of this series, where we'll cover more of the management of the process and beyond the process itself. And also, don't forget we have the NASCC, the Steel Conference, coming up in April. So it'll be in Baltimore this year. We will be there during that time, and we'll be at booth number 1703. So if you happen to be there, we hope you stop by and say hello. Anyway, thank you for your time, and we appreciate your attention. Thank you.